Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for attending. I know that it's directly after lunch. Please, if I talk too loud or too soft, give me a fingers up or down, because it's the first time that I'm presenting since COVID, but also the first time that I'm presenting to silent disco headphones. So I've decided not to wear my headset and move on without it. But like we said, I'm going to be talking about how to get your app noticed, and then also keeping it the center of attention there. My name's Cameron. I've worked at IronSource for the last 2 years approximately, and before that I've worked in the digital market industry for about 8 years in total. So I've been very fortunate to work with a number of brands across numerous verticals, all stages of the funnel, but today is very much going to be performance orientated, and that's going to be the focus of the conversation, specifically for people that are looking to gain attention for the app. So to touch on that, many people might have heard of the company IronSource. It's Israeli founded and been in the market for about 10 to 12 years at the moment. But for IronSource, there's two main cores of their business. And most people are more familiar with the one on the right-hand side that we can see here, where IronSource is a mobile-first company that typically helps game developers monetize their apps, as well as acquiring new users. However, one of the less-known products, and one of the things that's a massive opportunity, especially for the brands and the agencies that are in the room today, is the left-hand side where we're having a look, is what I'm going to be discussing today is what we call on-device advertising. And I'm going to go into more detail about it in future, but if you think of how people buy their phones, whether you're going directly to manufacturers such as Samsung, whether you're purchasing them through a carrier for a 2-year contract like Vodafone or O2, everyone is purchasing their devices in different ways. And with an on-device platform, what that means is you're able to engage with that user directly on the device, rather than maybe someone spending time in an app. But as with everything with performance marketing, we do know that everything starts with the user. So what I wanted to go into a bit of detail today, and just to pull a little bit of data into how different users use their phones differently. Now, everyone here probably knows, if you think about your parents or your children, if you have any, how they use their phones differently. But when you look into the data, it's really interesting, and I think it can be very helpful when performance marketers are putting together their marketing strategy. So the first one that I did is baby boomers. How I relate to this is my parents' generation. They adopted to phones maybe relatively late in their life. They are spending more time on their devices, and they are gaining more trust over that over time. However, they're much more cautious in how they spend it, or on what apps they're downloading and where they're spending their time on it. It's just something that's maybe generational. So when they're engaging with these apps, they're typically spending it on things that can make their life a little bit easier, and they're maybe not spending as much time on their devices as people that we used to. But then we're going to move across to my generation, and this is looking at the millennials. You know, I was born into a world where there weren't smartphones around, but I adopted them relatively early on in my life. So what that meant is I'm a little bit more trusting, and I spend a little bit more time on that phone than maybe the generation before me. Now, if you have a look at the data and the statistics of where people are spending their time, outside of social media, which might be the most obvious, millennials are spending time on travel apps. They're looking at things such as verticals such as e-commerce and shopping. There's a much wider variety, and spending a lot more time on those just because of the nature of how we use those phones. And then finally, for the data group, as we all know, is Gen Zs. I know that there was the Millennial 2020 conference a few weeks ago, and this is a massive talking point in how to market to this generation. But as long as we know that these are people that are highly reliant on their phones, it's very important to be highly connected and to understand what's going on in the world for them. So as a performance marketer, when you're approaching these users and you're trying to get that message, you're trying to gain their attention, you do it in a very different way to what you might do for a baby boomer or a millennial that we mentioned before. But something that we do know, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter, everyone in this room, I would like to see if anyone doesn't have their mobile device on them. Everyone's on their phones. Everyone's spending a lot of time on their phones. And we can see is it 85 times per day, typically people are checking their phones. If we're spending 5 hours a day on our phone, that's just under a quarter, or just under a third, I beg your pardon, of our waking day that people are on their phones. But a lot of that time, 88% of that time is spent within apps. So this is a massive opportunity for marketers to grab that attention for people while they're on their phone. And there's a number of different ways to do this. So when we're talking about capturing people's attention, when we're talking about user attention, user acquisition, it's very important to understand that efficiency is key. No one wants to waste their money that they're spending on their digital marketing campaigns. And clearly there's a huge opportunity. We just need to make sure that we're capitalizing on that. So if you're advertising to someone directly on their device, we present a unique opportunity to the core efficiency that we're talking about. And the reason for that is, if you're able to engage with someone directly on their device, at the point of when they're purchasing a new phone and throughout the device's life cycle, that will really help you to acquire those users and ultimately send them the right message to the right person at the right time. Now, I know I've mentioned on device, so I'll show an example in the next few slides, but just to give an understanding, let's say, for example, you walk into a Vodafone store and you purchased a new phone off the back of it. This is where on-device is integrated. It's directly on the device, and what we're able to do is customize the device over the air to recommend apps to a user at a point where we think is most relevant to them. So this can be when a new phone is purchased, this can be after having it for 6 months, 9 months, but ultimately, by having certain information, we can tell who the right user is and try to target that message at the right time. So, the key today is being efficient, and everything I'm going to talk about is moving back to efficiency. But the first one that we want to go into is making sure that we're personalizing the experience for that user. By being relevant, all of us here are maybe a similar demographic, but have very different interests. So for you to be successful in gaining that person's attention, you need to personalize that experience. So if someone has a phone and someone's giving information, or you have information as a marketer on that phone, we tend to put this into two separate brackets. The first one is a contextual information and the triggers that we have available. So when I'm talking about context, I'm talking about what device does a user have? How long have they had that device for? What are they using it for, and how much time are they spending on it? And then secondly, you have the opt-in information that a user has the ability to give to you. Now, what you'll see in a second is that people can tell you their age, they can tell you their interests and what apps that they have on their phone. So if you meet those in the middle, you can really personalize the experience of what that user is going to get. But I'm going to give you a real-life example rather than just talking about it. So here we have an example of the opt-in information. So we go back to when we said you purchase a phone from Vodafone, and then you've onboarded that phone for the first time. Typically what someone will do is restore all of their apps on their previous device. That's human nature. It's technology now. You transfer them directly across, and that information is now available to you. But then by prompting them with a call to action, that person's in the mindset of discovering new apps at that point in the journey. So by asking them who they are, by already understanding what apps they have on their device, you can really personalize it in terms of how that's going to be recommended along to them. The second one is a contextual information that you have available. So the example that we used here is an operating system update. This is a great opportunity to send a push notification to a user to grab their attention, because we know that they've just updated their device, and this could be a time where you might not have been looking to book a holiday 6 months ago when you bought it, but Booking.com might be a better or a relevant option for you now. I'm just going to have a quick sip of water. Okay. Moving on. So the second one that I'm talking about here is optimizing for ROAS. Now, this might sound extremely obvious to a lot of people in the room, but I've chosen ROAS, or the term ROAS, for a reason, and what I associate with ROAS is long-term value of that user. Not only have you acquired them and paid a certain amount to get the user to sign up, but you're looking at the long-term value of them over time, because everyone knows that not all users are worth the same, and you might be paying £10 for myself and £10 for my brother to acquire on your app, but we might not spend the same amount of money. So looking over time, you do want to integrate with these MMPs and track and measure that that value of the user over a long amount of time. Historically, when people thought of, your Vodafones, your Samsungs, the preconception came into mind of we're going to preload the app on all the phones in the factory, and at the end of the campaign, we're going to see how it did, and we're going to hope that it does well. But the likes of Amazon, the likes of Netflix and Disney, they shifting budgets onto on-device because it's giving them a new channel to engage with their users, but they can optimize throughout the campaign. You test, you measure, you learn, and then you start all over again. So that's a massive opportunity for it there. But you also have the ability to look at some of the data signals and decide how much you're willing to pay for each user based on the cost per install of them. So again, when you're not buying on an impression or a click, but you're buying on that first app open, this is where you can really segment those generations that I mentioned before and be willing to pay more or less based on the value of those generations over time. And finally, again, efficiency is key that we're talking about. And one of the ways to understand if you're being efficient is to look at the incrementality that you have. And if possible, to run an incrementality test. Now, many people in the room will know what the incrementality test is. You measure a control group versus an exposed group, and you see if there's an impact on the conversion rates post-install. So if you're able to do that directly on the device, this will be able to prove to you that not only is on-device an incremental channel versus your organic, but on-device is able to help you reach people that might not necessarily be on some of the traditional channels that you're seeing great success with. A lot of users that are seeing success on Facebook and TikTok might say our target audience, our demographic is 18 to 35. However, that might just be because 35-year-olds and above are tougher to find on different channels. Whereas if you're marketing to them directly when they purchase a device, that can be a very good opportunity to engage with them at a point when they're open to learning more. So as I mentioned, I'm going to wrap up this thing. Everyone here is on their phone. They're on their phone all the time, and they're spending a lot of time on their phone. So if you're looking to acquire new users, there are a ton of channels that are great out there to do that. But now there's this thing where you can customize a device over the air and recommend to the right user at the right time. So bear in mind efficiency. These are some of the best practices that I spoke about from there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. As I mentioned, my name's Cameron. I am on the app if you wanted to send a message, and I'll also be hanging out at the back for a little bit if you have any questions or anything that's not clear. I don't have my headphones, so I can't tell if there's any questions, but if there are, I'm sure the stage manager will let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.